Good to see everybody here this morning. I don't see my little clicker, but Chad, you're on duty for me today. Today we're going to be talking about Jesus and friends. And I know that sounds like, why are we talking about friends from the pulpit? Well, in today's world, when I think about my life and I go through all of the friends that I've had in life, I've had really good friends in elementary school, middle school, high school, and none of them are currently people who I talk to. And I remember, though, at the time thinking, like, this guy, right, this friend of mine, sixth grade, we're going to be friends forever, right? You go to seventh grade, you're in different classes, and you never talk to each other again. And I asked myself, well, what were those friendships based upon then? Like, why, what made them so strong? And, I struggle because I've never really been a person who's had a whole lot of friends. I know that sounds lonely, but I've never really cared about that. I've always liked just having like one or two close buddies. And if I had that, I really didn't need, 15, 16 people who I hung out with on a current basis. I just needed one or two. I just needed at least one, right? Who would acknowledge my presence every now and then when I walked by them. And I find myself looking at the world around us, and when I do devotionals in the high school or middle school, and I look around and I see people being influenced by the people they're around, it hurts me that sometimes I see good people turn out not so good because of just the people they've put in their lives. And so this morning, what we're going to really be talking about, go to the next slide, is the idea of friends. And this is kind of a joke, but if you've seen this before, Jesus' greatest miracle is having 12 close friends in his 30s, right? By the time you usually hit 30, if you have one or two friends, right, you're doing really good, right? If you're married with kids and you have one really close friend, you're doing really good, right? And so because priorities shift, right? And so Jesus' greatest miracle, that's just kind of a joke. But we're going to look this morning at the life of David. And I want to go through three different groups of people in David's life that help us to understand who do we want in our lives, who do we want in our kids' lives influencing us. So the first one I want to look at is family. I've always been really close to my family. We've always done a lot of things together, hunted together, camped together, hiked together. I would actually consider probably even today my brothers to be the closest of friends that I have, the people that I want to spend the most time around. But that's not true for everybody, is it? Not everybody is close to their family. Not everybody is close to their brothers and sisters. And so what I want to look at is sometimes family isn't all that it's cut out to be, right? You're born into a family, but what makes a family a family? It's not just because you're blood. Right, in 1 Samuel chapter 17, if you remember the story of David and Goliath, right? And Goliath is uttering all these kinds of blasphemies against the God of Jehovah. And all of Israel is sitting back, they're sitting up on a mountain, right? And Goliath is calling down, who will come and fight me? Who will come and face me? Who will come and be the defender of your God? And all of Israel is scared. Nobody will go out, not even King Saul, who was empowered by God, right, to defeat God's enemies. He had the Spirit of the Lord in him. And in 1 Samuel 17, David, who's a shepherd boy, right, and, we get this idea that David was like this 12-year-old, very innocent-looking boy. He's not. It says he was the words that describe him in 1 Samuel 16, he was a valiant warrior. Yes, he was a skilled musician. He was a good-looking dude, but if he's out tending sheep all day long and work in the field, he's not when we think of a 16-year-old boy who sits inside and plays maybe video games all day like I did, I was a little fluffy, okay? David probably wasn't fluffy, right? And he probably trained with the sword because he fought lions and bears, right? He had to defend, the animals in which, came and tried to. And so he wasn't just some scrawny little boy, all right? So I just want to kind of get that idea out of our head. A lot of our children's stories, have David looking like, he could barely lift a, 5-pound weight. But anyway, when he comes out in 1 Samuel 17:25, look what his brothers say. He said, "And the men of Israel, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely," this is David, "surely he has come up to defy Israel, and the king will enrich the man who kills him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel." And David said to the men who stood by him, "What shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" You see, David is living out a life of faith. He's walking up and he's just kind of coming on the scene. He's saying, so who's taking care of this? You know, where everyone else sees fear, David goes, there's a guy blaspheming the God who has empowered this army. Who's taking care of it? Who do we got ready? David finds out that nobody's, right? And the people answered him in the same way. "So shall it be done to the man who kills him." Now Eliab, his eldest brother, this is David's eldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, "Why have you come down? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your presumption and the evil of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle." Just think about that for a moment. David is coming and displaying this great faith of who's taking care of this Philistine. Well, everybody else in fear. And what does his oldest brother say about David? "You presumptuous little brat." Right? You're here for glory. Why are you here? You've got work to do back at home. And so sometimes family are the first people to come and do what? Criticize. Family may be the first people who come in and, "I know you." Right? "I know you." Think about Jesus and his own family. What does it say about Jesus' own brothers? For the longest time, who were the people who continued to not believe in who Jesus was? His own brothers. When you go to the story of Joseph and his brothers, who are the ones who threw Joseph into the pit? His own family. And so what I want to encourage us this morning, when we're thinking about the kind of people who we want in our lives, family is good, right? God has given us a family, and we need to treat our family well. We need to love our family. And David will still work things out with his brothers, right? They'll be there for him. But if you look at David's family life, and you look at his kids, and you look at all the things that go on and just in the life of David, his family was not his biggest support. His own son stole the throne from David. And so we cannot allow family to interfere with our faith and our relationships that are healthy. Because I can't tell you how many times there are people who give up their faith in God or don't come to a church in God because, well, my family, my mom and dad, right, my brothers. And so because, you know, and I've heard, well, if I believe that, that means this about my mom or this about my dad. That means we cannot allow family to interfere with what we know about who God is and what we need to be doing to follow God. And you can't always count on family to be there to encourage your faith. Because I just can't imagine David showing up, displaying great faith, and his brothers seeing that. Why do you think brothers would criticize David? You think there was some jealousy there? What have we been doing when we saw this Philistine? And now our younger brother, our youngest, the baby, he's coming and, oh yeah, okay, go fight him, right? Go fight Goliath, David. See what happens. David goes, okay, I'll go fight him. And what does he do? He fights him and he wins. And so we got to be careful that we do not allow our family entanglements to interfere with our working for God. There's a story in Matthew chapter 12 when Jesus is preaching, and he's in the middle of preaching. He's preaching hard. And all of a sudden, his mom and brothers show up, all right? His mom and brothers show up, and they stop him in the middle of his sermon, and they say, hey, your brothers, or your mother and your brothers are here. And what is Jesus' response? Who are my mothers and brothers? but those who do the will of my Father. You see, when you become a Christian, when you enter into the family of God, the kingdom of God, when you become a kingdom of priests, your family changes. Your family changes. It doesn't mean you cut ties with your physical family. But who should you be pursuing as your brothers and your mothers and your fathers and your sisters? Who should we be growing closer to? This family right here. Because this is the family that's going to help us do what? This is the family that when you are showing weak faith, they're going to encourage your faith. When they're seeing great faith, they're going to support and go, that's the kind of faith we need to see. That a boy, Jesse, that a boy, right? And so we suffer with those who suffer. We rejoice with those who rejoice. We are trying to get each other to heaven. And if you don't have people in your life like that, then they're not real family. That's what family is designed for. And you think about Israel, and you think about the nation of Israel, the number one role of parents were to raise their kid in the discipline of the Lord. And so a mother and a father who's not raising their kid in the discipline of the Lord, that's not a mother and father. That's not a spiritual father and mother. I tell people all the time that I've had more mothers and fathers and grandparents in my life than one person could ever wish for. I've got them in this room here today. People who encourage me. People who also, when I'm doing, Jesse, really? Right? People in my life who are there for me. And so family goes beyond blood. Family has to go beyond blood. And secondly, I'm going to look at another relationship. Go to 2 Samuel chapter 11. This is an interesting one because I've had one friend in my life who was that ride or die, right? You know that saying, the ride or die? That person that no matter what I said, hey, I'm going to go do this, they're like, I'm on it. We could be going to our death. I could be saying, we're jumping off this cliff right now. And they'd be like, let's do it. What's holding us back? They're also the people that if I showed up to their house and I said, man, I got myself in some trouble. I need you to help me get out of this. They'd be like, I don't care what don't even tell me what you did. I'm there for you. Now that sounds good and all, doesn't it? But that's not even the relationships that we really need to be desiring. Because if I show up to a friend's house and I say, man, I'm in some real deep trouble, I want my friend to go, what'd you do? What did you do? And I tell him to go, why would you do that? I'm trying to keep some words out of my mouth. Dummy. Why would you do that? Is that what God would have you to do? Is that the person who God has called you to be? Not the person who says, well, let's go grab the shovel. Right? That's fun, and those are cool, fun comments. We make those kind of comments all the time. But I want someone in my life who does more than the ride or die. I want someone in my life who's going to encourage me to be the man that God has called me to be. And remember in 2 Samuel chapter 11, this is the story of David and Bathsheba. And David sleeps with Bathsheba, right? Sees her on a roof, and calls Uriah back from battle, tries to get him to go home, right? So that we can cover this sin up. And remember when David sends a letter to Joab? Look at 2 Samuel chapter 11 in verse 14. It says, in the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by the hand of Uriah. In the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him, that he may be struck down and die. Now, if you are my friend, and I hand you a letter that basically says, because I'm asking you, now David's king, I understand that, and Joab is servant, okay? But Joab also went above and beyond for David. You can read there, he was a ride or die. He was going to defend David no matter what. If David was in the right or if David was in the wrong. He's also the one who encouraged David to kill King Saul, right? Kill King Saul. How dare I kill the Lord's anointed? But David, this will help you and benefit you, and this will be good for you. Who cares about anybody else? I'm here for you, David. I'm loyal friend. I'm a loyal friend. And so Joab receives this letter. And also as a child of God, what should have Joab's response been? I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Now watch how this story goes. As Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there would be valiant men. And the men of the city came out, fought with Joab. Some of his servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite also died. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting. And he instructed the messenger, when you have finished telling all the news about the fighting to the king, then if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, why did you go so near the city? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, the son of Jerubbesheth? Did not a woman cast an upper millstone on him from the wall so that he died at Thebez? Why did you go so near the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. Because watch, when he sent Uriah into battle, guess who else died with Uriah? Other valiant men. So when David is getting the list, and you've heard of all these people who you love, David, who died, and he gets angry, right? The messenger goes back. Let him know that Uriah the Hittite died, and his anger will go away. Joab knew exactly what he was doing. It cost the life of not just Uriah, but other men. And yet, because he was loyal to David, he did it. Now, I don't want friends who are so loyal that they will sin for me. I don't want it. I don't want friends who will do evil for me. I want friends who will do good for me. Remember Peter? When Jesus tells him, I am about to go to the cross? And Peter says, I will kill for you. I will not let them take you. Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. For your mind is on the things of the world, not on the will of God. And so we need friends in our life. And watch, David will even say, go down to verse 24 or 25. David said to the messenger, thus you shall say to Joab, do not let this matter displease you, for the sword devours now one and now another. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it and encourage him. Joab was upset that he went through with this, and David says, people die all the time in battle. It's just one more person. But he didn't just die in battle, did he? He died through betrayal. So Joab betrayed the trust of his own men because he was loyal to David. I don't want a loyal friend. Not in the way of the world thinks, where they're only thinking out what's best for me. I want this next kind of friend. I want a faithful friend. I want someone who's faithful to me. Turn to 1 Samuel chapter 18. Now, this goes back to the story of David and Goliath. So David defeats Goliath. Everybody hears about David's faith. Saul wants to crown him, right? He wants to throw a party for him. He's ready to do all that he needs to do. And Jonathan hears about David's faith. And here's what Jonathan does. And as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. Jonathan stripped himself of his robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor and even his sword and his bow and his bow and his belt. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. So Saul sent him over the men of war, and this war was good in the sight of all people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. Now, the loyal friend and the faithful friend seem very similar, don't they? But Jonathan's faithfulness was dependent upon the covenant that God made with David. And Jonathan knew that David was to be king, and Jonathan said, I am going to help you fulfill the will of God in your life. I want to be there so that God's will may be fulfilled in your life. And so even when Saul, Jonathan's own dad, was planning a plot to kill David, Jonathan made another covenant with him and said, I will save you. I will rescue you. Why? You are the Lord's anointed. And so his friendship went beyond, David, I am here for you. He saw David's faith, and he says, I want to have a friend that has that kind of faith. And he builds him up and encourages, and he's there for him when it's good for David and God's will. And so turn with me to Acts chapter 4. Acts chapter 4. And look at verse 19. Now, we looked at Peter before, didn't we? Peter was the ride or die for Jesus. I will die for you, Jesus. Even when the soldier came, what did Peter do when they came to arrest Jesus? He cut off his ear. He was still ready to kill for Jesus. And later, after Peter realizes and he sees the death, burial, and resurrection, and he understands the true nature of the gospel and that Jesus had to die, and that was the will of God, watch Peter's response now when he's asked, you need to stop speaking in the name of Jesus. Stop saying his name. What is Peter's response? But Peter and John answered them and says, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you, or rather than to God, you must judge, for we cannot but speak what we have seen and what we have heard. And they went on further to threaten them, let them go, finding no way to punish them because of the people, for all were praising God for what had happened. Now, Peter has changed it a little bit, right? He's still loyal to Jesus because of why? Because of the will of God. Because of the will of God. And so, turn with me to John 15. John 15. Here's my advice. Here's our application for today. After all the things that we've heard, what are we to do? How do we find friends? Because I'm going to be honest with you. This lesson is a struggle for me because it's hard to find friends when you've got family and kids and work and ministry and all the things that go on. It's hard to be close to people, right? Isn't it? And so in John 15, here's what I strive for, and here's what I love. You know what I love, what I have found? Over the years, I have given up my faith and become weak in my faith just to add friends in my life. Because I feel the need for, someone to care about me. Maybe I won't talk about that Jesus character a whole lot. Maybe my conversations, maybe I should start talking about sports more because, this person will only talk to me if I talk about sports. Or maybe I should talk about my work more often, which my work is, so that's kind of hard, right? Maybe I got to find some kind of hobby. And I have tried to get involved in things that I don't care about just to have people like me. And I just don't care anymore enough to really go out of my way to have to get involved in things that I don't like just to have friends. And if our kids could understand this concept, it would save them so much trouble in school and heartache in school, that the friends you are striving to obtain right here and now, especially in middle school and high school, I'm telling you, 99% of them are going to be gone. When you get out of high school, when you go off to college, you may speak to them every now and then. You may become Facebook friends or Instagram friends. I don't know what kids, they don't, not even Facebook anymore, Snapchat friends, I don't know, right? You may talk to them once a year, see some pictures of their kids when they finally get married and all those things, but that's as far as those relationships really go. You may travel back through your hometown, hey, let's get together for... But what I really want you to strive for is there's one friend you really need, and it's Jesus. If you strive to be friends with Jesus, guess who your friends will become? Those who also are striving to be friends with Jesus. Right? You want to gain friends that are good for you? Become friends with the friend. Look at John chapter 15. He says in verse 10, He says, if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be full. Where does our joy need to come from? Many companions, many friends in our life, the people who are in our life. Our joy comes from the Lord. Our joy comes from above. He says, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So you need to go about and share, be the kind of friend that Jesus was to those around him. And guess what? Jesus wasn't going to let Peter ruin and wreck his faith just to be friends with Peter. Jesus would get up and give a sermon, and people would completely walk away from him. People who were following him, people who were eating with him, and they got up and left him. Why? Because of the words that he spoke. But he put God's will first, and those who want to do God's will be involved. Remember in John chapter 6, when Jesus gives the bread of life discourse, and there was over 5,000 people that he just fed? People love a good meal, don't they? Right? They'll love to show up if you bring food. You start talking Jesus and getting real and not just light and fluffy stuff, right? And actually getting down to the core and actually speaking about deep things of God and things that God is actually calling us to be and calling us to do. What happens to those friends? I don't care if you got pizza, wings, whatever. They ain't showing up. Why? Because they know this is going to be opened. And that's too much for them. And so, as everybody leaves him, he turns to his disciples and says, will you go also? And what does his disciple say? What does Peter say? Peter say, where else can we go? You have the words of life. This goes beyond companionship. This goes beyond just needing somebody, to chat with and talk with. This is about people who are encouraging you to be the best man and woman of God that you can be. Those are the people that we need in our life. And so Jesus says this, greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. You want to be friends with Jesus? He says, no longer do I call you servants. For the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose and appointed you that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should abide, so that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give it to you. I love this. One of the best things about the church for me is, I want to be honest with you, in my life, there are many of you I would never hang out with because our paths would have never crossed. Because the things that you like to do and where you grew up and the things that you are a part of, I'm not a part of those things. I'm not a part of those things. I don't like those things. I only hung out with those who like the things that I like. And in Christ, I have gained friends, I have gained brothers, I have gained sisters of people who I would never associate with outside of Christ. Why? Because we have nothing in common. But in here, what do we have in common? We have God. We have Christ. Peter would say, those who have a like and